Hey everybody, welcome to Project Not So Slow. Today we got a pretty cool comparison. We got a turbo versus non-turbo OM606. Alright, so right here we have a turbo OM606 out of a 1998 Mercedes E300 turbo diesel. And right here we have a non-turbo OM606 out of a 1995 E300, but it's a W124. So we want to see what is the differences between these two engines, the cylinder heads, the blocks, pistons, rods, and let's start with the outside of the engine. Starting here with the exhaust side, there's a nice turbo exhaust manifold that goes into this tiny little turbo. The exhaust manifold here, it's a two-piece that goes into two exhaust pieces that go under the car and it meets up into one somewhere in the middle of the car. Major difference between the 95 and the 98 is the 95 is a mechanical injection pump, but all turbo 606s came with a EDC pump, which is an electrical injection pump. It's very similar, except the back housing where all the adjustments are made, it's all electrical, which in some cases it's better for controlling the fueling, so you could drive a close to smoke-free car. On the 95s and the 96, pretty much the intake manifold is the same. It pretty much wraps over the injection pump, and then it has one pipe that crosses over the valve cover and gets air from the air box. This actually kind of makes it easier sometimes if you need access to the injection pump. And then the valve cover is a little bit different on the non-turbo models. It's a little shaped a little bit different, so the pipe runs through. And the valve cover on the non-turbo models is not painted. It's one of the first signs that it's a non-turbo. So other pretty important differences are the crank pulley is different on the non-turbo and the turbo version. So the non-turbo actually gets a crank pulley from the older OM603s. It's pretty much the identical crank pulley. OM603/NA 606 crank pulley, and this is a turbo 606 crank pulley. They are identical as in fitment wise. We are actually running a 603 crank pulley on our turbo OM606 in the race engine because that engine came from a burnt car and the crank pulley melted off of it. The vacuum pump is exactly how it is in the OM603. The turbo 606 model, the vacuum pump is different and the timing gear inside is actually different so that vacuum pump can fit. As far as the fuel filter housing, both of them pretty much have the same fuel filter housing with the plastic connectors. One thing to also note, in the 95s, oil filter housing is similar to the OM603, except this one doesn't have the cooler lines that go to the cooler in the front, as the turbo version has these hoses run to a oil cooler in the front. As for the non-turbo, it does have an oil cooler, but the oil cooler is kind of interesting. It's in the oil pan down here, and there's coolant coming from the water pump housing. There's two ports where it goes in and back out. What we did was we connected the water here to our ball bearing turbo. That's where we got our water from. It's the water that was going to the cooler. We had to go through the turbo first, then to the cooler to cool the oil. So it's kind of interesting how it works, how this oil cooler works. These two right here pretty much fit directly into the oil pump pickup, and it goes in and back out. It's kind of interesting. Now let's look at the blocks. This is the non-turbo one, and the 95 non-turbos, they don't have anywhere to get oil on this side of the block or to drain the oil, and they don't even have the space provided for future machining. So this is a 603 non-turbo, and as you can see right here, it actually has a spot that is ready to be drilled and tapped for the oil drain, how it would be on a turbo block. The only thing is the oil feed is not here. As far as I know, I might be incorrect, but the 96 NAs have this spot right here for the oil drain and have the oil feed spot pretty much ready. You just have to drill and tap into it. But the 95 doesn't have anything prepared for a turbo, so we had to drill and tap a hole in the block for our own turbo drain. I just got this at Home Depot and it did great. I mean, we drilled a hole, tightened that down with a pipe thread, and it's been doing awesome. No leaks. All the oil is draining properly. super happy. When we were filming the turbo installation, we did not we forgot to measure and pretty much tell people where we put the turbo oil drain in the block, because there are ridges inside where you don't really want to drill into those. So let's I'll just measure this real quick so that people know exactly where it is. From here to the alternator bracket bolt, it's about 1.25 inches. So in order to get the turbo feed, we took out the oil pressure sensor and we ran a line to the turbo. All right, so here are the numbers for the 95 NA block. It has the 08 and part number just in case anybody's interested. And then here's the turbo ones. Turbo block, say 15. And then I don't even know the whole number, but for the turbo side, the turbo have a oil feed that's right here prepared for your turbo, and the oil drain comes from the factory. All right, so I took the covers off, the valve cover. So on the turbo version, the blowby has just one tube that comes out, hole through here, and then goes into the turbo, versus the non-turbo. It's kind of interesting. It has this whole pipeline system over here that has basically an individual port to every single cylinder. It's kind of interesting that they did that. I don't know why, but one thing that's really annoying is they always break. You try to remove them and they just disintegrate. And the hole is not drilled right here for the way it is in the turbo models. But it looks like it's very easily converted. So it looks like for the most part the valve cover is identical other than paint, and this hole's not drilled. So easily convertible to a turbo version. So here we can see on the 95 non-turbo the mechanical injection pump. It's a really awesome pump. It has the most updated cam in it, RS203 cam in it. The injector lines on the non-turbo turbo identical, routed, identical. So no real difference there. So now let's take off the valve covers and look what's underneath. Okay, with the valve cover off, it looks like the same engine. We have pretty much cams and a cam cradle, the gears, the chain, the sprocket. Everything looks and is identical. I already disassembled this engine, that's why it's off, but it's all the same. So we're going to get back to checking out the cam, or the exhaust cam, because a lot of people say that the NAs have a better exhaust cam. So we'll check that out. Ooh, look at those BC valve springs, available only at benchforce.com. For the valve springs, this is the valve spring that came out of the NA. I'm not 100% sure if it's the same as on the turbo ones, because most of our turbo ones already have upgraded valve springs. That's the first upgrade we would recommend. One major difference in the NA versus the turbo models is the injectors. The injectors in the NA are 115 bar injectors versus the turbo ones are 135 bar injectors. There are injectors that people make 150, 170 bar injectors. Haven't tried those out yet, but I really want to. So now let's look at the heads themselves. For the most part, the heads, as far as I can tell, are very much identical, right? I don't see any difference between these two. I can't even find any markings that would be different. Okay, so the heads are pretty much identical. They have the same part number on both the non-turbo and the turbo version. The only difference that we noticed is, so some of them actually have like a little port right here. Like on the non-turbo, there's a sensor there, temperature sensor. But on the turbo ones, as you see right here, it's usually nothing there.
It's weird.
But for some reason, this turbo one had it. This one doesn't have it either. So, I don't know. It was cool when we were filling that radiator. We had the water come out from here. So we knew that it was filled to the very top. So let's move on. Let's pull the heads off. All right, so here we have the non-turbo 606 cylinder head removed. And one difference that we have is the head gaskets. The non-turbos have a composite head gasket, very similar to the 603, which is a 603 gasket right here. Similar, just have these holes a little bit different. So in here is a turbo cylinder head that comes with a metal layered head gasket. These are way stronger, way better. We have been pushing over 60 psi with one of these, and it's been awesome. Okay, looking at the heads like this side by side, they pretty much look identical. The valves are the same size. But one thing that I do notice is the pre-chambers are different. If you look at the pre-chambers on the turbo version, it has a lot of like smaller holes versus the turbo one has fewer larger holes. So the actual difference, I'm not 100% sure which ones are better, which ones are not. No opinion on that. And now let's move on to the pistons. All right, so let's pull out the piston and check out the rods in the NA. What the? Piece of string cheese? I knew they were soft, but I don't know about that soft. But seriously though, let's take a look at the non-turbo rods. These, I pulled this out and I was like, no way. Can you tell it's already bent? That's crazy. So this engine, I'm not sure what exactly bent it. Either our ball bearing turbo that spools extremely quick and us running it a little bit more than 300 horsepower, or the S252 kind of, I think a few times kind of took it almost to 30 psi, huh? It was like 28 psi or something a couple of times, which that turbo does over 400 horsepower. Absolutely no problem. So I'm not sure which one actually it was, but I think I would stay under 300 horsepower. Maybe like a HX whole set HX30, so you can get some good lag and a little bit of power. All right, so our plans for this NA OM606 goes as follows. We need to make our W124 faster than a Hellcat Charger. Daniel's laughing, but it's gonna happen. And let me tell you why. We were talking to Rodney over at Ben's Force, and he gave us two options. Either we can leave the NA piston with the smaller wrist pin and just get F-Tune NA upgraded rods, which are available at bensforce.com, or we opted for, as he sent us a brand new turbo piston with the upgraded turbo rod. These are Ben's Force's X-Beam rods, which he doesn't have anymore because they weren't very popular, but he has the H-Beam rods, which are very strong. So now this NA OM606 is about to become a very, very strong, powerful engine. But for a lot of people, the NA piston with the upgraded NA rods is a great option. Alrighty, moving on to the top of the blocks. They are very much identical. Here's the part number. The non-turbo 95 OM606. This right here is a turbo block. Looks identical to the non-turbo block. And here's the part number for it. 98 turbo block. So here we have a NA piston and turbo piston next to each other. Just put them side by side so it's easy to visualize. And they are virtually identical. So moving on to the other side of the blocks pretty much look the same. A few people were wondering if the NAs had oil squirters. Yes, they do. So the NA, the ones that came in the W124 NAs, have the oil squirters out of a OM603, versus the turbo ones have these pressed in, but I'm pretty sure they do the same exact thing. The only thing is a lot easier to manufacture. So the NA cranks and the turbo cranks are identical. They could be interchanged, including the OM603 and the OM606. You can use them in each other, like 603 crank in a 606 and a 606 crank in a 603. They're all the same. So now let's go to the table and check out OM603 turbo rods, OM606 turbo rods, OM606 NA rods, and OM603 NA rods. So I laid out all these rods and pistons side by side. Here we have the OM603 turbo rod, wrist pin, and piston. Here we got the turbo OM606, you know, the one that makes the engine famous. The pistons between the turbo 603 and the turbo 606 are very similar. The wrist pins though, turbo 603 and turbo 606, slight difference right here. I don't know if that means anything, but we're going to weigh them here in a second. Here's our NA rod. You already know, nicely bent NA OM606 rod. And then the piston, significantly smaller. Like if you're looking at the two pistons on the bottom side, the turbo piston, the oil squirters squirt into these holes, and it cools the piston inside, which is really nice. If you have high AGTs, a really big oil cooler, I think can definitely prolong the life of your pistons, versus the NA pistons have a lot less material and less things going on. Here's a OM606 turbo versus non-turbo wrist pins, but apparently the non-turbo wrist pins are plenty strong enough for over 1,000 horsepower cars, so should be just fine. Then we have the 603 NA rod. It's a little bit different than the 606 rod. Looks about the same, other than it has this little channel right here where the oil flows up to lubricate the wrist pin. No hole up top because it doesn't have oil squirters. Very interesting. But here's the wrist pin of the 606 non-turbo and a 603 non-turbo, and the two pistons. We got 606 non-turbo, 603 non-turbo, pistons side by side. So now let's weigh them. So for the weight of the Turbo 606 rod, we have 23 ounces for the Turbo OM606, 24.01 ounce for the Turbo OM603 rod. Very interesting. As for the wrist pins, I kind of want to weigh them just to see what the difference is. 603 Turbo, 9.1 ounces. 606 Turbo, 8.67 ounces. Here we have pistons. The Turbo 603 piston, Turbo 606 piston. From underneath, they pretty much look identical. I mean, if you probably look at them from underneath, if you mix them around, you wouldn't even know which one's which. If you flip them over, obviously it's clear the 2 valves in the 603 and the 4 valves in the 606. But thickness, they're pretty much the same. Let's weigh these real quick. A 603 turbo is 22.8 ounces. 606 turbo, 21.4. Wow, lighter again. 22.8. 21.4. Wow. That OM606 turbo pistons and rods, the whole assembly is already a lot lighter than the Turbo OM603. Very interesting. So now the NA OM606 rod. It's already bent. That spicy ball bearing turbo just, comes in a little bit too fast. Compared to the OM606 rod. Huge difference. Huge difference. The 606, the Turbo 606 rod is significantly larger and thicker. So now let's check the weight. 20.6 ounces. Yes, that's pretty light. And then for the non-turbo OM603 rod, 23.37. Heavier than a 606 turbo rod. What? No way. Yeah, 23.37 ounces. Wow, I'm a little bit impressed by that. So here's the 603 non-turbo, 606 non-turbo rods side by side. Size-wise, they look pretty similar, but they're quite different. The non-turbo OM606 has oil squirters, so it has the holes on the top to lubricate the wrist pin. The non-turbo OM603 has no oil squirter, so it has a hole at the bottom of the rod so that oil can travel up and lubricate the wrist pin. There's no hole outside here to oil the wrist pin. Very interesting stuff. As for the wrist pins, here's the difference of a OM606 non-turbo and OM603 non-turbo. They're both diameter identical, 26 millimeter. Let's check the weight. A 603 is 5.7 ounces. A 606, 5.3. Now for the non-turbo pistons, a non-turbo OM606 piston is 19.84 ounces. 603 non-turbo, 22.36. Wow. I mean, you could definitely actually tell when holding it. So we got 19.8, 22.37. Wow, what a difference. I'm just going to throw this on the scale and just measure it to see how it compares to a turbo rod. So we have a X-beam bench force rod, and that weighs 24.79 ounces. What was the Turbo 606 rod again? 2301. So slightly heavier, but these are a lot more robust. I wrote down all the sizes on this board, so if you guys are interested, you guys can pause it, write it down, screenshot it to keep for yourself. You hear a lot of talk about NA cams versus turbo cams, especially the earlier 95s. So we have them next to each other. I'm no professional at measuring cams, but I'm going to do my best. So here we have the exhaust side, which I hear is the biggest difference. Okay, so let's measure this lobe, the NA one. Like 47.6 millimeters height-wise, 47.6. Literally identical to the turbo. And then width-wise, like this, right, this part, 38.2 millimeters. 38.2 millimeters. They're literally identical. They're literally identical. Like, look at that. They're identical. There's absolutely no difference between the turbo and the non-turbo exhaust cam. Same thing as on the intake cam. We got what, 46 millimeters, right? And then let's see this one. 47 millimeters. This is the intake on the NA.
Interesting. So the intake on the NA has a bigger lobe, really? Yeah.
Yes.
By a millimeter, by 1.1 almost to millimeters.
So this is like literally for the biggest part I can measure is 45.9 millimeters on the intake, and on the turbo 46.9. So it's a full millimeter taller. Now if we look at the width right here, we got what is this? 38.2, and on this one we have 38, slightly smaller.
Yeah,
so it's minus the rust. So what it looks like, exhaust is identical. Intake cam actually has 1 millimeter higher lobe. So I'm planning to put this in the race car to see if that yields us another 30 horsepower. That's big without adding boost. There's just more air flow. So we mentioned the differences that we can tell and that we know of and that we've learned about. So if you guys know more, please do comment about it. We love to learn. Don't mind being corrected. So thank you guys for watching. God bless you guys. God bless America, and good night.